name is Britt Romstad. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white person with quite a lot of curly grey hair, and I'm wearing a lot of black today, just in keeping with the theme. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands and waterways of Greater Melbourne, the people of the Kulin Nation, and recognise that we're gathered here today to share stories and knowledge on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and warmly acknowledge any First Peoples here with us today. So, when a visitor to ACMI's Melbourne Winter Masterpieces exhibition Goddess, Power, Glamour, Rebellion, walked out of the gallery and commented to a researcher, "There's still a really long way to go, you know. Fuck the patriarchy." As a member of ACMI's senior leadership team, honestly, I was delighted. And that was regardless of whether or not this was delivered as a radical clarion call or as more of a sort of gentle nudge at Taylor Swift in the post-Barbie universe. What our visitors took away with them from their experience at Goddess was absolutely integral to understanding whether or not the exhibition met its objectives, so this felt like an excellent start. We all measure ticket sales, web hits, click-through and conversion rates. If we're honest, most of us in this room are probably really obsessed with that stuff, myself included. And these provide us with really important insight into the efficacy of the work we do. Is the marketing campaign resonating with our target audiences? Is our EDM strategy delivering and engaging? Are tickets sitting at the right price point? But post-pandemic, and in the midst of a cost of living crisis that really shows no signs of abating, audience behaviours are really unpredictable. They're increasingly impossible to really understand using the same old toolkit of quant indicators. Most importantly, what these measures don't tell us, what they can't tell us, is whether seeing an exhibition, attending a performance, listening to a talk changes a person once they leave our buildings. And isn't this actually really what we need to know? Outside of these traditional measures and business intelligence tools, now, more than ever, it feels like this is the work we need to do to understand that what we're delivering for our audiences is impactful. Why? Well, I guess most of us would agree that providing more equitable access to our spaces and amplifying the voices of marginalised groups within them is work we're all committed to doing. Actively countering exclusion actually isn't just the right thing to do, it's the work we all need to do to make sure we're relevant and future-focused. Surely, by providing benefit to our communities, it's only by being able to demonstrate this that we can show we have genuine public value. And straight demographic data really just isn't enough for this. Sure, we can show that a percentage of our audience is from a marginalised background. If we're lucky, we can show this percentage is growing. But it's really the stories that accompany this data that provide evidence of impact. Do these audiences feel welcome? And can they see themselves represented in our work and in our visions and values? Certainly, at ACMI, our focus, which has been baked into our new 5-year strategic plan, it's on making our museum approachable and accessible, making our work inclusive and legible for an audience that might otherwise view museums as exclusionary spaces. For all of this then, we need to find new ways of defining and assessing success as outcome rather than output. If it's less about what we do then, and more about how this has impact, by extension, it's really less about us and more about our audiences. So, to return to our visitor, expressing her frustration with the slow progress of social change, yes, we viewed this as a small indication of some success. We didn't believe that Goddess could dismantle patriarchy, if only it was that easy. But we did want our visitors to leave the exhibition as advocates for change, armed with an awareness both of the politicisation of gender on and off screen, as well as the ways in which progress, aka social change, can be frustratingly slow and non-linear. and no amount of ticket sales data analysis can fully tell that story. The journey, all the way from idea to posters out on the streets, was a really extraordinarily long one for Goddess, delayed by both a complete museum redevelopment as well as, of course, a global pandemic. What initially was conceived of as a pretty straightforward celebration of old school movie stars, the Hollywood goddesses of the silver screen in the 1940s and 50s, it was complicated by the rise of the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements, as well as really rapidly evolving conversations about gender, identity, and intersectionality. So it was really clear, as Australia's National Museum of Screen Culture, that ACMI needed to lead a conversation that addressed these complex issues, all issues that were much more visible in mainstream culture at that moment than at any other time before. With all that said, the exhibition that opened in April 2023 set out to celebrate the power and complexity of screen goddesses across the history of film, from silent cinema to the contemporary moment. Goddesses who were, and continue to be, bold, rebellious, and defiant, and whose work has both defined and disrupted what we understand as the feminine ideal. The exhibition highlighted and honoured their impact on screen culture and also on society more broadly. The title Goddess, of course, was a deliberate provocation. Initially created as a marketing tool by studios to sell their films via their leading ladies, while the word goddess is of course deeply gendered, it's not essentialist, and so the exhibition really lent into the idea that goddesses are defined by their impact, not by a prescriptive set of physical attributes, which the subtitle, Power, Glamour, Rebellion, really tried to emphasise. In order to assess whether the exhibition was as impactful as the goddesses highlighted within it, we set up a series of visitor outcomes that worked to define what social change might look like in the context of an exhibition, given we understood dismantling the patriarchy was probably out of scope. And so we measured this through surveys and visitor research that we conducted throughout the course of the exhibition. We asked our visitors, did seeing Goddess challenge your understanding of gender? Did it increase your understanding of the history of women and non-binary people on screen? Did it reflect your own community and culture? Did it provide you with an increased awareness of the uneven nature of social progress? And did it change the way you think or feel about a familiar story, actor, or character? And did seeing the exhibition, to what extent did it champion diversity and make you feel welcome? So, what did we learn? Opening with Marilyn Monroe's classic performance of Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend in the film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, by showcasing the many ways in which women across time and place have reworked Marilyn's famous pink dress in this scene to articulate their own feminine ideal, Goddess opened with a bit of a battle cry that demonstrated, since the ideal will inevitably reflect the beliefs of the culture that produced it, the meaning attached to femininity will always be political. In response, 84% agreed that Goddess developed my understanding of the history of women and non-binary people on screen. Furthermore, 87% of visitors agreed that Goddess highlighted the uneven nature of social progress. One visitor commented, "I loved it. What an inspirational exhibition. And as a woman, I feel privileged. All these incredible icons fought so hard before me so I could have more equality." Or, "I always loved these women, but have never considered how much of a trailblazer they've been." Which was obviously really gratifying to observe. But here's where it starts to get a bit interesting. When we look at who visited Goddess, almost 80% of the audience identified as women. Like many museums, our standard audience is made up of around 58% women. Conversely, only 19% of Goddess visitors identified as men. And this was something that was apparent to us right from the moment that we opened our doors to the public. We tried to counter this in a range of ways, producing marketing material, for instance, that showed men inside the exhibition having fun and not being threatened at all by all that content. But ultimately, the audience composition did not shift across the entire run of the 6 months that the exhibition was on. That men were largely disinterested in Goddess was a bit disappointing, I'll be honest, but honestly, not really surprising. I'm sure many of you will know, like I do, that across the opening weeks of Barbie, for instance, around 67 to 71% of audience members identified as women. But what did surprise us was the fact that there were so many women whose own internalised narratives meant they didn't come and see the exhibition either. In fact, many women who were approached by our visitor experience staff members and by our researchers commented that they couldn't come and see the exhibition because they were visiting the museum with their husbands, boyfriends, sons, insert appropriate male companion here, and it would have been unfair to expect said male companions to visit an exhibition that only focused on the work of women. One visitor told us, "You know, I think I would love it, but I'm not sure if he would enjoy it. He's a 13-year-old boy." And we had a lot of comments like this. One woman who did brave the exhibition with her boyfriend noted the need to apologise to him in advance. "I told my boyfriend, sorry, this is probably going to be all about women and feminism." While occasionally we observed a woman splitting from her male companions and going into Goddess on their own, it was much more common for these women to choose instead to visit the rest of the museum with their families and leave Goddess for another unspecified time. Underpinned by the tenacious belief that men's stories are universal and women's stories are for women, we know that along with men, there were a whole bunch of women who didn't make it into the exhibition, even though many of them expressed a real desire to see the content themselves. So the big question for us is, does our inability to convert a male audience diminish the impact of Goddess? It certainly highlights one of the real challenges around advancing or even being part of a social change agenda. As one visitor commented upon seeing some men in the exhibition, it was good to see them down there. That men would actually care about this show feels encouraging. The irony, however, is not lost on me that as an organisation, and certainly at a leadership level, we spent a great deal of time over the many months that the exhibition was on discussing the relationship of men to an exhibition that was self-consciously about centring the voices of women. So in the spirit of that, I would argue that whilst we need to acknowledge who didn't come to the exhibition, we need to be clear about the impact of Goddess on the audiences it did get. And here, the content ensured that for those who attended, there was plenty to learn about, be surprised by, or identify with. The exhibition self-consciously explored some key stories from other film centres outside of Hollywood, including India with Meena Kumari in the film Pakeeza, Hong Kong with Michelle Yeoh in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Japan with Anna Tsuchiya in Sakuran. Moreover, it set out to acknowledge the accomplishments of women within Hollywood, like Dorothy Dandridge, Anna May Wong, and Josephine Baker, whose stories have been largely erased from mainstream narratives, but who all managed to achieve enormous levels of success with work that really challenged myths sitting right at the intersection of race and gender. The exhibition also teased out a number of films, characters and actors that spoke to queer identity, including The Watermelon Woman, Orlando and Marlene Dietrich, who was highlighted in Goddess for the ways in which both her on and off-screen persona, in which she wore men's clothes and self-consciously rejected demure femininity and heteronormativity, exposed the fantasy of prescriptive gender binaries. Accordingly, 88% of visitors to Goddess believed that the exhibition championed diversity, and we know this was very impactful. Visitors told us, "It's so good to see more than white Hollywood represented. I didn't realise it was including trans and LGBTQIA+ perspectives and so many cultures. I didn't realise the depth of it. And it's really intersectional and doesn't feel tokenistic." Moreover, the impact of this was uneven and in the best possible way. So, while on average 67% of visitors said that Goddess included stories that reflected their communities and cultures, when we drilled down into this data even further, we discovered that 81% of LGBTQIA+ audiences said Goddess included stories that reflected their communities and cultures, and 76% of audiences from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds said Goddess included stories that reflected their communities and cultures. Over the course of the exhibition, we accumulated so much rich qualitative data that included stories about why the exhibition was so important for these visitors. This feedback, for instance, highlights how impactful seeing the exhibition was for this visitor. Watching and reading the stories of diverse women made me feel empowered and motivated. Before this, I felt I would not be able to achieve my dreams as an actress because there were not many representations of POC women in modern films. Thank you for this exhibition. It sheds light on many issues that women face that are not often talked about. Or this one, being of Asian background and belonging to the LGBTQIA+ community, this exhibit really demonstrates the movie industry's struggles with showing diversity, especially here in Australia. When we're thinking about the outcomes and the impact of Goddess, these stories are very significant. We're living in a time, as you all know, of ever-increasing social unrest. And we feel daily that politics are polemicised. Identity sits at the apex of this. As a publicly funded museum, it's critical that ACMI provides programming that supports social cohesion and an experience that feels safe and welcoming for our visitors. Our values support this endeavour. We continuously champion diversity, inclusivity and cultural safety, and we're approachable, accessible and reflective of our diverse communities. Which is why it was so important that we held ourselves to account and asked our visitors, did you feel welcome when you visited Goddess? The response was that 91% of people visiting Goddess said the exhibition made them feel welcome. And we know that this was even slightly higher for our LGBTQIA+ audience members. The rewards that come from being outcomes focused are rich and complex. The lessons learnt from Goddess have profoundly changed the way we work at ACMI, from an understanding of the ways in which attendance targets must be built in tandem with the development of audience outcomes, to the rollout of a research and evaluation strategy that supports us with the delivery of these outcomes through the collection of rich qualitative data. As I've shared, the experience of Goddess was both frustrating and very rewarding. While we were largely unable to get men interested in the exhibition, and we know this had an impact also on the number of women who attended, our analysis shows that Goddess was deeply impactful for those who did attend, and especially for our younger, culturally and linguistically diverse and LGBTQIA+ identifying visitors. Moreover, visitors told us that after seeing Goddess, 90% of them saw ACMI as a socially engaged institution. 87% of them saw ACMI as supporting and facilitating equity. And 73% of them saw ACMI as starting difficult conversations. So Goddess was not only impactful in terms of our desired exhibition outcomes, but in a range of other ways as well. Critically, it also served as a really valuable exercise in building awareness of ACMI's commitment to our values, which places us in a really great position to be able to push for the longer arc of social change through programming and strategy, which is a good thing, because as we all know, there's still a long way to go.